everybody to Survive in Advance on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. I'm your co-host for Survive in Advance, Mike Goodpaster. And right now, I would like to welcome in my immortal co-host. He was a member of the 1981 National Championship Indiana Hoosiers, where he combined for 26 points with Isaiah Thomas to beat the North Carolina Tar Heels. And he's a member of the Indiana Basketball Hall of Fame. And he's probably just maybe the nicest guy I've ever met. Help me welcome Steve Risley to the show.
Oh, that might be the nicest introduction you've ever given me, Mike.
Yeah,
Thank you very much for that.
I mean, most of it was lies, but...
That's okay. I'll take lies. At my age, I'm going to be 60 by the end of the week, so I'll take lies.
I'll be 50 soon. So, all right. Today, we're going to talk a little college basketball, and we brought in a writer from Busting Brackets and Fansided. Help me welcome to the show, Brian Rauf. How you doing, Brian?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
All right, Brian, let me ask you a question because I always like to ask basketball people this question. Had you ever heard of Steve Risley until today?
Of course. He's a notable name.
Okay.
Every college basketball fan should know.
Boy, that's a crock of shit, too. Jesus. Okay. My opinion of Fansided just dropped a little bit. That's fake news right there. I thought Fansided was a legitimate site. They come up with that kind of crap. You've never heard of me. Don't give me that. Jesus. Come on, Brian.
He did after I brought you up when I asked you if you wanted to do the show, and he did a Google search, and he found the man with the biggest head in history and said, hey, I want to talk to that guy.
That's about right.
Cool. Big heads and having fun are very commonly misinterpreted with each other.
All right, so let's start off college basketball. And Steve's probably more comfortable because we're usually talking football this time of year. But
thank God we're not talking football.
When we look at the top teams, the thing that stands out to me is Michigan at number 5. I think Michigan should be in the top 3. And I think it's possible before the year's over with John Beilein, who I think is one of the best coaches in college basketball, Brian, that Michigan might be the best team in the country.
The argument can certainly be made. And since we're springing off football here, isn't it nice that we can actually have a conversation about a sport with everybody getting a shot at a championship and not just a certain number of teams and everybody has a chance?
Tell us about that, yeah.
Well, I know. But I agree with Michigan being a top 3 team. I think they've shown as much to this point in the season as anybody in the country. I think Gonzaga's a worthy number 1, considering what we expected from them and what they've shown so far in that win over Duke. I think you can throw Duke in that top 3 as well because of how dominant they've been, and even in that loss to Gonzaga, how well they played in that loss, keeping it close. But Michigan's been blowing everybody out. I think their average margin of victory this year is over 21 points a game. Nobody can match, at least to this point in the season, nobody can match those wins against Villanova and UNC and Purdue, and they've won all of those games by a combined 63 points. Nobody has that resume, so yes, you can keep Kansas above them if you want to, and Virginia as well in that top 5, but if we're going just off this year and resume just off this year, nobody has a better resume and has looked as good as Michigan has.
All right, so Steve, what have you thought of Michigan so far? I know we do the Indiana basketball show with Colin Hartman. To me, Michigan looks like the best team in the Big Ten. You know Michigan State's going to be there, but what's your take on Michigan?
Yeah, I look at their schedule right now. I mean, they've got some quality wins already under their belt. Certainly, beating Purdue, beating Villanova. Although I don't know how strong Villanova is this year. Brian, maybe you can enlighten us a little bit more about that. Providence is always a tough program. But, yeah, the big factor is whoever they're playing, they're winning by large amounts, which tells me that they are clearly head and shoulders above all their opponents so far. I think Michigan right now is underrated. I just think it's a Big Ten thing right now, where, again, the pollsters don't favor the Big Ten early in the year. They get their darling teams like Virginia, ACC schools and things of that nature. But I like Michigan a lot. Now, you said, Mike, you got to watch for Michigan State. Izzo gets that team ready come tournament time, and it's going to be a dogfight. And there's going to be some other teams step up in the Big Ten.
Yeah, and
but
the Big Ten,
strong.
The Big Ten, Brian, I think, is deeper than what it has been for a long time. I think you could actually end up with 7 or 8 teams getting seeded in the Big Ten. What's your take on the Big Ten so far?
I think it's much deeper than I think a lot of people anticipated. It was a bit of a down year for the conference last year. And then this year coming back with a lot of the conference performances, what they did in the ACC Big Ten Challenge, and then even this week with the start of conference games, their little November, December early conference games. There are as many, as you said, 7 or 8 teams that could make the tournament, and there's probably 10 teams right now that could make the case for being ranked in the top 25. That many teams have picked up good wins and looked like quality teams to this point in the year. I do think there's a bit of a separation with Michigan State as the clear top 2 teams. But that middle tier has about anywhere between 6 to 8 teams who have legitimate cases and should have legitimate expectations of making the NCAA tournament.
All right, so what's your take on the Indiana Hoosiers? As I said, we do a weekly IU show. They play at Penn State tonight. Directly after that game on the gruelingtruth.net, you can hear myself, Steve Risley, former IU player Colin Hartman, talk about it during the post-game show. What's your take on the Indiana Hoosiers?
I swear I'm not sucking up here. Coming into the season, I thought they would end up being the 3rd best team in the Big Ten. I really like what they have. I think they'll continue to grow as the year goes on, as Romeo Langford, in particular, becomes more comfortable playing in the college game. Him and Juwan Morgan, I think, will eventually form a 1-2 combination that can play with anybody in the country. My concern for what I've seen from them so far, and going back to last year too, is the way they play at Assembly Hall versus the way they play away from Assembly Hall.
Yeah.
At Assembly Hall, they can beat anybody, and have shown they can beat anybody. Away from it, though, not so. To be kind, not so much.
Brian, would you say that's a product of being just a young team with a lot of freshmen, a lot of other than Juwan, really they don't have a lot of seniority on that basketball team. So that's something that's going to meld into that the mentality of these kids, and Archie's going to put that into play for them and teach them how to win on the road. Is that something that, to me, it seems like something that's pretty easily fixable?
Absolutely. I think last year the way they played at home kind of boosted their profile above where they should have been, maybe based on talent, and we maybe saw some regression back to that on the road. This year, I do think it's a lot of youth. They're relying on a lot of young guys in those roles, and those guys are all talented, and they'll get better as the year goes on, so they're not going to, I don't think, put up as many stinkers like they did against Duke. But that is something to watch with how strong the middle of the Big Ten is. That could maybe affect seeding, but I don't think it's going to affect them getting into the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, right. I got a question for you, Mike, if that's okay.
Sure.
And I got an opinion on this. I want to hear yours because you're probably a little bit more educated on this than I am, because I'm still dilly-dallying with football. Is this a year of great parity in the tournament? Or right now, what I'm kind of seeing is probably a little separation of maybe 5 or 6 teams that are kind of separating themselves in the top 25 that are really standing out. And then you got another pack that's just a notch below them, where many years we see from 1 to 25, you can almost interchange anybody. I so far haven't seen it this year. What's your thought process on that? Is this parity, or is this kind of elitism this year?
I think there's parity in tiers. Like you said, I think late in the tournament is going to be a lot of fun because there are 6, 8, you can potentially even go 10 teams that have separated themselves as the top, and even in that group, there's another group that separated themselves at the top of that group, all of whom you would expect, maybe, with one upset or two, but most of them you'd expect to make the Elite Eight, Final Four, which will make for a really interesting Final Four. Those teams will take up the, seeds 1, 2, and 3 seed lines, but really seeds 4 through 13, I think you'll see a lot of parity because we've seen with teams like Radford, teams like Buffalo, teams like Furman. There's a lot of really good mid-major teams this year. That doesn't mention South Dakota State and Mike Dahm, who is capable of potentially carrying the Jackrabbits to a win over anybody. You're going to have a lot of those really good mid-major teams in that 13, 12, 11 seed range. Buffalo is obviously going to be much higher. But then if you look at the power conference teams that are going to be on that 4, 5, 6, 7 line, none of them scare you. Take Villanova, for instance. They're a name of a good team who will probably end up being somewhere in that range, and they lost at home to Furman. I think we'll see a lot of upsets in that range early in the tournament this year, which will make for a lot of fun. At the same time, later on in the tournament, you'll see those top-tier teams that have separated themselves advance and see the cream of the crop. So I'm really excited about this year and what's gonna happen and play out down the line. I think there is a lot of parity, but there's parity in those
parity,
tiers.
Yeah, I like that phrase because I agree with you. There are different levels of parity. There's the elite parity, then there's the middle of the pack parity, then there's the the surprise, we're going to surprise you parodies. Unlike many years where there's just parody. There's no one great team in the top 25 period. Now you've got Gonzaga, Kansas, and Duke, Michigan, and I'm going to discount Virginia because I have a sore spot with their idiot point guard, Kyle Guy.
Yeah, because this is the thing, Brian, and you may not know this, but Kyle Guy played at Lawrence Central High School.
Stole my scoring record.
And he
illegally.
didn't steal Steve Risley's record. He just broke it.
No. He didn't break it. He scored 1,500 points. I scored over 1,600 points. I called the school and asked, why are you calling him the leading scorer of all time in Lawrence Central basketball? And they said, well, he's the modern era leading scorer.
Yeah, that's how old Steve is.
I graduated in 1977.
That sounds like an important classification that needs to be made.
Well, see, Steve was 6'8" back then.
We're down at my level of relevance.
You know,
it is
back
important.
in the 1920s, there weren't many guys 6'8", so Steve had a huge advantage.
Yeah, there you go.
Move on.
All right, so let's look at Duke. I mean, everybody talks about Zion Williamson. They got more than just him. I watched them play IU, and they dominated IU. But to me, it didn't even look like they are playing near what they're capable of, Brian.
No, and that's really the scary thing. They've gotten, to start off, I think they've gotten a lot more help from their depth than people expected, me included. I think there's still some questions about them going beyond maybe 7 or 8 deep, but Jack White off the bench and Alex Connell off the bench have given them some depth, so they're not just relying on those star 3, star 4 freshmen as much as they are. But to your point, they're not playing up to their potential. Zion Williamson has been about as efficient as you could want a player to be inside the arc, but I think he still has some room to grow and show improvement outside the arc, obviously, and something on the jumper. R.J. Barrett, I still think, is the best player in the country, talent-wise, but he's had a couple games to this point in the year where he's been very inefficient. That'll change. I think he's forcing the issue and trying to establish himself as maybe the alpha on the team, and that's led to a lot of his inefficiencies and turnovers and bad shots and things of that sort. But I think he'll eventually settle down and find his way like most talented freshmen do. Cam Reddish has faded away in a couple big games, and we'll see if that continues, but he certainly hasn't played up to potential in those big games. And then Trey Jones just keeps getting better and better at point guard, so he's a very good player now, and he'll be much better and have an even bigger impact down the road as well. And keep in mind, these are 4 freshmen who are still integrating into a team, and they haven't played together outside of really this in their careers either. So as they become more comfortable and get more experience together, that's also going to increase their level of play as well. So the team that we could see from them in March is going to be really, really dangerous and really, really scary.
All right.
Let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question. And you can answer this if you want to. You want to skirt it, I get it, because you're getting paid for the site you work on. But is Duke legitimate? I mean, Zion Williams turns down a 6-figure deal from Kansas, allegedly, and then all of a sudden decides to freebie go to Duke. Is Duke legit, or are they just figured out a way to get by with it and not get caught?
Here's my thing with that. Well, I actually at my old site reported about the whole Kansas Zion thing last year, about how they were trying to kind of steer him towards that, and sort of after that he sort of shut down his career and got quiet about it. My thing with programs like Duke and Alabama in football and ones that are that big, obviously if a shoe company is funneling players towards programs, you're going to funnel them to those. But if you're Alabama and you're Duke, Alabama football programs like Duke and basketball, you may have an opportunity to be above that because of who you are and your track record of getting players to the pros. For instance, Nasir Little, who plays for UNC now, was going through high school, and he was mentioned in a lot of the federal trial as well. But he was approached with those things and did not, and basically rejected all advances from Adidas and these low lifes who were going after him, trying to give him some money under the table and feed him in certain schools, saying he's not going to mess up his future for 1 year. And if you're programs like Duke and Alabama football who can have a track record of proving that you come here for, in Duke's case, you come here for 7-8 months, you're going to get your money. There's no sense in you risking anything else about that and getting into a Brian Bowen situation for that 1 year. And so maybe he wants to it'd be naive to think that there's not any chance that this goes on. But as weird as it sounds, because Duke got so many good players this year, in this class specifically, maybe it was a situation of them. I find it more believable to say it was a situation of the players saying, let's all play together for 7-8 months, be as good as we can be, and then elevate all of our profiles and go get even more money down the road, and that we can wait for that to have this fun now.
Okay. I mean, I'll just say Zion Williams is a kid that didn't need to go to college. He's only there because he has to be there. I mean, he could be in the NBA right now making $10, $20 million a year right now, or whatever contracts that are allowed for rookie players. I don't know what that is, but
none of those kids need to be at Duke. All three of them. You could argue that Trey Jones probably needed to go to college for a year, but Reddish, Williamson, and Barrett all could be making a bunch of money and making impacts at the NBA right now.
Yeah. So when we look at the ACC, the team that looks like the biggest challenger to Duke is Virginia. Last year they were the number 1 seed, got upset in the tournament. What has Virginia done? Have they done anything differently to be a better team when it comes tournament time? Because I think with Bennett there, I think his teams are great for the regular season, but a one and done I think is a little bit different. Do you think he's done anything to kind of tweak that?
There are a couple things. Well, first off, they're not necessarily playing at a faster pace offensively, but they are slightly. They're being a bit more aggressive offensively. They're averaging more points than they had in years past. And now it's not out of the realm possibility for them to get 70, pushing 80 on a certain night. They still want to play slow and grind you out, but they're more potent offensively. And I think that goes back to the development of DeAndre Hunter, the small forward who came back after testing the draft waters last year, or potentially going to the NBA draft. He missed that UMBC game. Is a great defender, and everyone saw the upside of him last year. This year, he's really coming to fulfill that. He's leading the team in scoring, averaging somewhere between 16 and 18 points a game, I believe. So having a legitimate NBA scorer certainly helps you on that end of the floor when you're going to need to score points late in close games, which is something that hurt them last year. And in that UMBC game in particular, Hunter obviously would have helped guard Jarris Lyles, who was UMBC's star guard, who lit him up for 23, I think, and was the key to that. They really got exposed in terms of their lack of quickness defensively in the backcourt. They added, his name escapes me, they added a small guard this year who, number 0, he's playing alongside Ty Jerome and Kyle Guy in the backcourt, who is that role. Ty Jerome and Kyle Guy take over all the offensive duties. He is the quick defensive guard who is on those quick perimeter players and has made a big difference in that regard. One thing that still concerns me, and what UMBC did to Virginia last year in the tournament, was press them. No team really presses them. They let Virginia play slow. And Ty Jerome and Kyle Guy both struggled with turnovers and bringing the ball to the court and getting into their offense against UMBC. Nobody's really tested them this year yet with that same pressing style. So once they pass that test, I'll be fully on board with that this is a different Virginia team. But that's something I still want to see them improve on and get over.
All right. Anybody that just came in, we're talking with Brian Rauf. He is from Busting Brackets on the Fansided Network. Brian, you want to tell everybody where they can find you on Twitter?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at BRauf33. That's at BRAUF33. And then, as you mentioned, online at bustingbrackets.com.
All right. We go to the Big 12. You look at Kansas. I think they're better than what we've seen from Kansas, especially in the backcourt the last couple of years. But my big question is, how good is Texas Tech? I mean, they haven't played the greatest schedule, but they got a couple nice wins. What's your take on Texas Tech and anybody else there that may be able to challenge Kansas in the Big 12?
Texas Tech is probably the team that can challenge Kansas the most. I think coming in the year, we all really liked Kansas State and their ability to challenge Kansas because of how many people they returned from last year's team. But they haven't necessarily looked the part to this point in the season. Kansas State has the experience, has the players, but hasn't looked the part. They lost at Marquette over the weekend, and I think may not be as good as they showed during their tournament run last year. Texas Tech, though, people maybe weren't expecting as much out of because they lost Keenan Evans, they lost Ira Smith, but Chris Beard has really shown the strength of the program that he's built at Texas Tech. I think this is his third year, so really short time there. But they play excellent defense. kind of in the Virginia mold, a little bit quicker than Virginia is in terms of pace, but play excellent defense and are playing that excellent defense again. Jarrett Culver, who was probably the third best player on last year's team, got overshadowed by Evans and Smith a lot. He has stepped up and become a legitimate, I think, star and first-team All-Big 12 caliber performer. He's carrying a lot of load offensively. They're big, they're long. Matt Mooney as well, who's a grad transfer from South Dakota. He's given them some more scoring punch as well, which was a problem for them at times. Their style of play, with the way they play defense, is always going to be a problem. I don't think anybody is going to knock off Kansas, but because of their style of play and the way they don't beat themselves, I think Texas Tech is probably the biggest challenger to them in the Big 12.
And, it should be noted, too, that's a culture that was started by Bob Knight in a few years ago. He kind of revived the entire basketball culture of Texas Tech. Well, and then it kind of went downhill pretty much when he turned it over to Pat Knight. But you got it going in the right direction.
Never leave anything to your kids.
Yeah, never leave it to your kid of any value.
Yeah, because they'll screw it up.
They'll screw it up.
The kids are never as good as, or never as great as the parents.
Brian, a couple questions for you here. First off, talking about UCLA. What the hell's going on at UCLA? Is Alford legit there? Or, that's a program that has basically floundered for the most part since he's been here. They've had their moments. They've won some games. But this is UCLA. This is the mecca of college basketball. This is the home of John Wooden. What's going on at UCLA?
They had the Lonzo Ball year, and I think that has really bought Alford a couple more seasons. I think, but now this is really the breaking point for him. He's recruited well. He's been able to recruit well. He's always been a good recruiter, and with the UCLA brain has been able to bring some players in. And they're young, and that's understandable, but they just don't show any toughness, and they don't execute at a high level. I think that was one thing that was really alarming when they went and played in the Las Vegas Invitational and got smacked by Michigan State and then ended up losing in the second half.
North Carolina.
Yeah, they just didn't have any fight, any pushback, no real resiliency. And so they're talented individually, but I think are probably better at this point individually than they are as a team, which falls back on coaching. And then when you don't have the resiliency or toughness to overcome that, which again falls back on coaching, you have a problem. And because all those things point to coaching, you have no choice but to look at Steve Alford and think of him as being on the hot seat. And if they don't, maybe an early exit in the NCAA tournament, or if they don't make the tournament altogether, which the Pac-12 is terrible this year, so that is not out of the question. He's definitely going to be someone to watch as we get into March.
All right.
Yeah, which surprises me too, because Alford's a Knight disciple. He talk about one thing Knight's team always did was play tough basketball, play defensive-minded, tough basketball. And I've been to several practices at UCLA because I'm out here, and Steve's a former IU player, so I get accorded the opportunity to go to some practice things like that. And I don't see if you called out right away, I don't see the toughness in their practices. They practice more like a pro team than they do like a college team. And I think they play more like a pro team than they do a college team. So, but I just was curious. Now, the other question I had for you, Mike, did you have a question? I can say my question. Go ahead. I'm kind of dominating time here. Go ahead, Mike.
Go ahead.
The other question I had for you, conferences, top to bottom, who's the strongest conference this year? Who's going to put the most teams in the tournament? Who's going to make the most noise in terms of a conference this year?
In terms of the team that puts the most team, or the conference puts the most teams into the tournament, it's either going to be the Big Ten. As we discussed, we can get probably somewhere between 7, 8, 9, 10 teams in the tournament, or the ACC usually gets around 7, 8, 9 in the tournament as well. It's going to be one of those who get the most in. But I think the ACC is going to have the most teams go far. You look at right now, Duke, Virginia, UNC are going to turn it around. It's not going to be surprised if all three of them make the second weekend. Potentially a couple of them make the Final Four. Virginia Tech is really good, despite what they've showed in a couple games. They lost to Penn State. Was a little bit concerning for me, but they're still a really talented team. Florida State has proven to be really tough, and are coming off that Elite Eight appearance last year. They still don't have Phil Kofer, who was arguably their best offensive player, and they've performed pretty well this year without him either. Those five teams, I think, would not be a surprise to make the Sweet 16, make the second weekend of the tournament. And then no other team or no other conference necessarily has that many teams where you can look at and say, oh, yeah, that's a second weekend team. So In terms of number of bids, I would go Big Ten, ACC, but in terms of most teams who can make a long run, I would look at the ACC.
What about the SEC? You got Tennessee, Auburn, and Kentucky. I don't think it's as deep as it was last year because I thought the SEC was fairly deep last year. But what's your take on the Tennessee, Auburn, and especially Kentucky? I know a lot of Kentucky fans listen to the show because Steve Risley loves Kentucky.
They paid me well when I went there for a visit. I'm happy.
There you go.
That was the biggest haul I got when I went on my recruiting trip was Kentucky, so I'm all happy. I got no problems there. I got more of the sweatshirt when I left Lexington.
There you go. I think Tennessee and Auburn are both legit. I had some questions kind of about both coming into the season and if they'd be able to replicate what they did, and both have and taken it to another level. Kentucky, there are the usual questions with them about their youth, how all the pieces fit together, if they can get used to that. Some of the returning players who are expecting bigger roles, adjusting to their roles. So Kentucky will find themselves, and they're talented enough to be okay. Those two teams you look at and are, I would say for sure, second weekend teams all the way around. Each have a weakness that can kind of get exploited, but I would still expect those three to move on. Outside of them, though, Mississippi State has not looked great. We were expecting a lot from them. I really like LSU and LSU's potential this year. I think they're a potential second weekend team, but a lot of that I think has to do with the matchup that they get and how consistent they play. I think the SEC in total gets around 6 or 7 teams in, and then you'd have Auburn and Tennessee and Kentucky make the second weekend. But they're more dependent, I think, the success of those teams depends more on matchups than just the overall strength of their team, like the teams in the Big Ten or ACC.
Now, team that go ahead, Steve.
No, go ahead, Mike. You're carrying your thoughts. Go ahead. I'm going to research something here real quick.
A team that I think is going to be really good by the time we get to tournament time is Louisville, and that's Chris Mack.
That's what I was going to ask. Exactly.
I live in the Cincinnati area, and Chris Mack, I've watched Xavier for years. Very tough defensively, very tough mental team. Don't make a lot of mistakes.
Surprisingly good.
And it looks like, Indiana had Archie Miller last year, and everybody, like it was his first year, he didn't have his guys. But Chris Mack seems to, kind of enforce his will on his teams. And this is a team that they lost early by double digits to Tennessee in a game that might have been a little closer than that. They lost to Marquette, but over the last 2 games, they've beaten Michigan State by 4 points at home, and then they went and beat Seton Hall at Seton Hall. Am I crazy here?
No, not at all. The improvement from last year is incredible, and even the improvement from the start of this year has been incredible. Their defense is sound. We talk about UCLA not playing with any toughness. Louisville plays with an extreme amount of toughness and what you'd kind of expect from a Chris Mack team. Given what we've seen from them improvement-wise this year, it's not crazy to think that they're only going to get better. I think they're going to end up getting that designation late in the year. We always talk about this team in February, March, the teams that you don't want to play against, that the top teams don't want to play against. That's going to be Louisville. They don't have the top-end guys who I think will really push them over the top and make them, a Final Four contender, one of the better teams in the ACC or anything like that. But they're going to be that really tough team that doesn't beat themselves and gets that designation of the team you don't want to play. And they'll make the tournament, could win a game because of that, and they're going to be really exciting. I think Louisville fans should be ecstatic about their chances this year and Chris Mack and what he's doing with the program. So I really, really like what they're doing there.
All right, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I'm probably just naive, stupid here. They're eligible to play this year, right? In terms, they're not on probation at this point in time, are they?
No. I believe unless I miss something, they're good.
Yeah, they're good. Yeah, because Indiana faces them next Saturday.
This Saturday.
This Saturday, yeah, December 8th. Yeah, exactly right. So that's at Assembly Hall, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's a huge test for Indiana.
In fact, Mike, I'm trying to get you tickets right now. I'm waiting to hear back from IU if I got you tickets for the game.
Yeah.
So
you just realized it was this week, so now you just sent them an email. Don't lie.
No. I sent the email 2 weeks when I told you I sent it 3 weeks ago. But they don't tell you until like 3 days for the tournament for the game because I'm not Isaiah Thomas, so I don't automatically get favorite son status at IU.
Yeah,
that's the way it goes.
Remember that you're not Isaiah Thomas. Go ahead,
Steve. I know, but Isaiah Thomas couldn't have been Isaiah Thomas without me either. But that's another story. We'll save that for another time.
Steve. I think very easily Isaiah Thomas could have been Isaiah Thomas.
Right. I'm having a good time talking to you. Talk to me a little bit about the conference tournaments. Are they relative, really? I mean, do they carry too much weight in terms of selection process, where one team can maybe struggle through the entire season, then get hot in 3 games? And win their tournament, get the automatic bid for the conference. Are conference tournaments overrated? Are they legit? Are they the way to pick our teams that go into the final 67 and everybody go in? Or should we rely more on the drag-out season of conference schedule?
Well, they're made for TV and money, so they're not going away anytime soon. I think they're overrated for the mid-major conferences, the smaller conferences who want to put their best foot forward, and having a straight-up 1 through 8, 1 through however many format puts them at real risk of having one of those Cinderella teams run through, get that automatic bid, get to the NCAA tournament, and get blown out in the first round, which doesn't do the conference any favors when you may have a team who won 26, 27 games, only lost 1 or 2 games in the conference during the regular season, had an off shooting night, and is done. We're seeing some mid-major conferences kind of adjust to this. They're still doing conference tournaments to get on ESPN and get the money that comes along with that, but are adjusting the formats to where just the top 1 or 2 teams has a double bye and basically gets an advance to the semifinals automatically. And I think we'll see a lot more of that, where teams conferences start changing the formats of those tournaments to bend over backwards to give major benefits to those top teams, to give them a better chance to make the tournament, to win the conference tournament and claim that NCAA tournament bid. But tournaments aren't going it. Those things aren't changing.
Mike, you got anything?
Oh.
I have another question if you don't.
Well, go ahead. That's why I was waiting. I just figured you'd keep going.
All right. Well, it's college basketball, man. It's my heart and soul. All right. And Brian seems to know a hell of a lot more than – I think Brian's forgotten more about college basketball than you'll ever know, Goodpaster.
Whatever.
So just,
maybe
let it go.
Maybe from 2000 to now, but I think I've got him before 1990.
Yeah, well, then now you're back in my day of the Kyle Guy modern day era. You're back in that era. You're back in that.
Yeah, if
realm
you want to talk about the 1984 Dayton Flyers and Roosevelt Chapman, I can do that all day long. But yeah, over the last 10 to 15 years, I'm pretty much dead above the shoulders. I can't remember.
I actually met Mark Aguirre one time when he was playing at the ball. So there you go. He was buddies with Isaiah. He came out to party with us one weekend.
Yeah, and you know what? Maybe Isaiah couldn't have been Isaiah without Mark Aguirre or Joe Dumars, but I don't think he'd have missed Steve Risley. Go ahead, Steve.
Oh, God. Okay. Brian, who is the best coach in college basketball right now? Mike and I debated this. We obviously thought Villanova's coach, but he seems to be struggling. Who is the best coach in college basketball? If you had your son, you go play for anybody you wanted to play for, where would you want him to go and play?
I still think it's Coach K. Just what he's done historically, what he's doing this year, the way he's proven to be able to adapt really from the mid-2000s to now with one-and-dones. And now suddenly Duke teams are athletic and still shooting a lot of threes, but attacking and playing their same similar style of defense. I don't think you can go wrong with Coach K. Jay Wright is still one of the better coaches in the country, even though he has a team that's, I think, clearly building a lot more than we thought they were going to this year. That doesn't mean he can't coach. It's a rebuilding. They lost a lot more talent than they were expecting to lose, which I think set the program back a bit further for this season than we were expecting. Can't go wrong with Bill Self-Ever. I think John Calipari gets a bit of a bad rap in terms of his X and O coaching because of how good he is as a recruiter. He's a lot better X and O coach than a lot of people give him credit for. There are a lot of other coaches like that who are really, really good coaches, but at the end of the day, you can't go wrong with Coach K.
I like John Beilein.
Mike, you want to school him right now? Mike,
I want John Beilein. John Beilein or Mark Few. John Beilein or Mark Few. Because Mark Few built that program. That program was non-existent. I mean, the only thing anybody knew was John Stockton played there a long time ago. And he's made them a relevant program. And that, to me, stands out to me. Now, I know Duke, when Krzyzewski got there, was kind of in a mess. But if you remember, in 1980, they were in the Elite Eight. 1978, they played the national championship game. So it was just a couple down years. I think Krzyzewski is a great coach, but I think guys like Mark Few and even John Beilein, who goes to West Virginia and wins, he goes to Michigan. And people thought Michigan was going to be down this year, coming off last year's national championship game. So I think there's a lot of great coaches. If I had to send my kid anywhere, I would send him to Indiana because we do an Indiana basketball show.
There you go. Well, I think Archie Miller is still a bit underrated as a coach. I think in a couple of years we'll see him mention that conversation as well. You can't go wrong with Mark Few. You can't go wrong with John Beilein. Just for me, maybe it's because I live in the Raleigh-Durham area, so I'm around the Duke program and things with that more.
Yeah, a couple of observations there. Mike and I talked about this when we watched Gonzaga play Duke out in Hawaii. It kind of seemed like Krzyzewski was mailing it in, coaching-wise. I mean, he didn't seem – I mean, he'd won 6 of those tournaments in a row, and he was letting his team play kind of helter-skelter basketball. And I know Mike and I brought this up on one of our earlier shows on Surviving Advance. It kind of felt like he was mailing in a little bit. Is he getting to that point now where kind of that Bob Knight mentality, and he'll never be a Bob Knight because he's got more self-control on the court, but in that where he's accomplished about everything he can possibly accomplish, and he's relying a lot more on talent right now than he is on his desire to go out and put the time and effort into coaching. And just an observation.
I don't think that's the case. I think in that game specifically, what we saw was Mark Few having a much better idea of who his team is than Coach K does with Duke.
Yeah,
because Gonzaga's got pretty much everybody back from last year, and they're a program that doesn't have the one-and-done type guys, even though they had Zach Collins do so, I believe, 2 years ago when they made the championship game. But Mark Few has a much better idea early in the season right now of who his team is than Coach K does. What Coach K knows right now is that he has a bunch of individual players who individually are better than your individual players. And so I think in that game, they took a lot of one-on-one opportunities. Guys like R.J. Barrett taking their man off the dribble. We saw a lot in that game of R.J. Barrett trying to go one-on-one. And I think Coach K was content to, one, kind of see that because I think he thought R.J. Barrett's going to beat his man one-on-one. Zion Williamson's going to beat his man one-on-one. Let's see how that goes. It didn't work. I think the players may have got a little bit too entrenched in it. And I also think Coach K is notorious for his motivational tactics, and maybe keep in mind, at that point in the season, Duke was talked up, and it was a given by most people who gushed and praised about the team that they were going to go undefeated no matter what, and they were really propped up to that year. So I don't want to say Coach K may have mailed it in that game, but there may have been some motivation for him to maybe let them be humbled a little bit and hear some negative things about themselves.
So Brian, would you say that he was good with letting them learn from a loss?
I would say so. I don't want to say that that's.
Because this is the thing. We had a big argument about this. Yeah, we had a big argument about this, and that was my opinion. And Steve Risley said that you never learn anything from losing.
Well, that's not why Duke lost the game. They didn't lose the game because Coach K decided they were going to lose the game. They were down.
Don't back off of it, Brian. Just go with it.
They were down nearly 20 points in the second half.
You have to admit that. You don't learn anything from losing. Don't give me a crap. I've never heard a legitimate story for losing a basketball game.
No, I don't think he maybe minded losing that game as much. I think maybe he played some more vanilla sets to see what his players could do, and I don't think he viewed that as a loss being a terrible thing, but he didn't go out trying to lose the game, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I don't think he went out trying to lose the game.
No,
I think in the end, I don't think he coached it like he would later in the year because, number one, as you said, I think he's trying to learn what he's got, and also to teach them a lesson that, there's a better way to play the game.
That I agree with.
Yeah, well, most great coaches will tell you they hate losing more than they enjoy winning.
And that has nothing to do with learning from losing, which you still have not understood.
And I just don't think you can ever learn anything from losing.
Well, I think this: if you don't learn from losing, you never win.
I think Indiana learns just as much by beating somebody by 2 points as they do by losing to them, Arkansas by 2 points. You can learn the same things by winning the game, but don't tell me you learn more just because you got to put an L up instead of a W. I don't buy that. I'll never buy that. But I'm an athlete.
Yeah,
so I'm
sure
a player.
You are. You're an athlete. Anybody go to Facebook, punch in Steve Risley, look at him, and then I want you to make any comments on our Twitter page at Grueling Truth.
There's no picture of me on Facebook, Mike. I don't put myself on Facebook.
Oh,
I don't
there's
sit there.
Pictures of you. I'll post a picture then.
Not on my Facebook page, you won't.
Doesn't matter. I'll post a picture.
Okay, well, go ahead.
Okay. Go ahead, Steve.
Player of the year. Who's the best player in college basketball? Is it Zion Williams or is it somebody else?
R.J. Barrett.
That's one of the big questions right now. You certainly could go with Zion, and no one could argue against you. I still think R.J. Barrett is the most talented player, but Zion Williamson has been playing better than he has been this year. Carson Edwards at Purdue, I think, was leading the race up until a week and a half ago, and he has struggled to come back to the pack a little bit. You go with Roy Hachimura at Gonzaga, who largely outplayed Zion and has the head-to-head win over Duke in that matchup. I think right now you could go with Hachimura or Zion, and you could go one of those two ways, and either way you'd be fine. I would lean Hachimura's way because of that head-to-head, but I think those two guys are the front-runners right now.
All right, let me rephrase the question. Who's ready? Who's the most ready to make impact in the NBA next season?
R.J. Barrett.
Really? Above Zion Williams?
Yeah, Zion is excellent inside the paint, and he's going to get as much a production pretty much now. He'll get as much production in the NBA as he pretty much is now. He'll be excellent around the rim, but a lot of his athletic advantages, he'll still have those athletic advantages wherever he plays, but they're not going to be as extreme as they are now. So he'll come in the NBA and he'll average 18 and 9 right off the bat, no problem. But I think we'll see a lot more of the weaknesses in his game, the lack of being able to stretch the court really with his jumper exposed. And that it's not to say that he's not going to be super effective and a star right away in the NBA. R.J. Barrett just checks more boxes against similar competition. So, again, one of those things, if you took Zion, it would not be – nobody could really argue against you. I just think R.J. Barrett can do more things, and because both are going to go earlier in the draft, that team is going to need that player to do as many things as possible. And I think from a small forward, you're not going to be able to get a player who does more than R.J. Barrett does.
All right, so let's look at the week ahead in college basketball through Saturday or Sunday. What are the matchups here that really intrigue you? To me, off the top of my head, the Arizona State at Nevada game I think is really interesting.
That is going to be one to really stay up and watch because really after this game, Nevada has a fairly easy schedule. And if they win this game, there's a great chance Nevada could enter the NCAA tournament undefeated. And if they enter undefeated, they're one seed, and there's that whole storyline. But this is really one of their last big tests before they get into conference play, which they'll be favored a ton in every game. They're still favored in this game, but by a significant amount. Arizona State is a really good team. I think we're still kind of judging just what tier, I guess you could say they are. They've proven to be in that top 25 tier and are a really good team. If they beat Nevada with a game against Kansas winning, they'll move into, I think, that top 10 tier. The Pac-12 could also really use Arizona State winning that game just because of how terribly the whole conference really has played in our conference outside of Arizona State. I really like that game, and I really like the Indiana-Louisville game that we talked about a little bit before. That's going to be a game. Indiana's going to have a great chance to pick up a win. It's going to look really, really good late in the season at home. And if you're Louisville, they didn't make the tournament last year largely because of not having those top-tier wins, those quadrant one wins. Getting a road win over Indiana is just going to add another win onto that on top of Michigan State win they got this week. That'll be huge for them. And I think two teams who you would argue Indiana is, I would say, probably above Louisville in talent level, but they're pretty much at the relatively same place in the national pecking order. So getting a head-to-head win and separating themselves, whoever wins that game, I think is going to be huge down the line.
All right.
Hey, Mike,
Yeah.
You talk about staying up. The game's on at 8 o'clock out here. So where do you guys? Well, no big deal. It's on. Arizona, Nevada's on at 8 o'clock.
Yeah. Plus, you can lay out in the pool and watch the game from your palatial estate.
I will be. Matter of fact, I will be. Yeah.
There you go.
I think tip time for Vegas purposes. We'll see what time it actually tips off, but tip time for Vegas purposes is 11:59
9 o'clock.
Eastern. So
yeah, which is 8 o'clock out in LA.
I don't know. Isn't LA 3 hours? Should it be 9 o'clock there?
Yeah, that's getting late
Yeah,
for
I think,
Steve. I mean,
Nevada's-
usually at the
I think
nursing home they turn the
Vegas is an hour
TV off
behind
at
us,
9, don't they, Steve?
Vegas is an hour behind us, I think.
Yeah, but Steve,
Well,
you know that
Whatever, that's immaterial.
you know the nursing
either
home
way.
turns the TV off at 9. You're not going to be able to watch the game.
No, the Kardashians come on at 9 o'clock. Come on, give me a break.
Oh.
They're on daily out here.
And another game before we wrap this up that stands out to me is Loyola Chicago at Maryland. Because I don't think Maryland's played the greatest competition, even though they've won pretty much every game they've played. What's your take on that one?
Loyola needs to win that game for seeding purposes. They're still the favorite in the Missouri Valley, but they've had chances to really keep their national profile at the level, not at the level it was when they made the Final Four last year, but keep themselves nationally relevant, and they haven't done it. That loss to Furman now doesn't look like a bad loss. Furman's a good team, but losing at home to Furman, you would still expect them to win that game earlier in the year. They got blown out again at home by Nevada. They need a win to kind of make themselves feel good and relevant nationally going into Missouri Valley Conference play. Maryland also, as you've mentioned, hasn't really played anybody, and for all the talk of Mark Turgeon, another guy who's on the hot seat this year, he needs a win to get fans feeling good about themselves going into conference play and giving fans and the team confidence that they can beat some of the better teams that they'll face on their schedule. So I think it's a very important game for both teams, like you said.
All right, Steve, do you have any final questions before we let Brian go?
No, Brian, I really appreciate it. Fansite, guys, it's a great site. I mean, I do a lot of my research on Fansite. So a lot of stuff I do for our show, I go to Fansite, and they really insightful reporting. Fansided.
Brian, you want to tell everybody where they can find you on Twitter again?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at brauf33. That's at BRAUF33, or on bustingbrackets.com.
All right, guys, and tomorrow at noon Eastern, live on thegruelingtruth.net, we'll be talking college football with college football coaching legend Jackie Sherrill. He'll be on the show tomorrow, so make sure you check us out back there. You can follow us on The Grueling Truth at Grueling Truth on Twitter, or you can find our Facebook group page. Just type in The Grueling Truth on Facebook. You can hear all of our shows on Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher. Wherever you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for Brian Rauf, Steve Risley, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.